So, good evening. Tonight is Wednesday, June the 16th, Monday. It's 5:30 p.m. And the United States plays Ghana in the World Cup. That's starting at 6 o'clock. So we'll see how long tonight goes.
Okay.
It's a bit crowded here tonight, of course. There are, let me count here, one and me. I appreciate your loyalty, Teresa.
Thank you.
Your dedication or your inclination to suffer, whatever you want.
One or the other.
Well, you got anything on your mind?
I haven't honestly begun to try and attempt the case one. Like we just discussed about economics and putting all this stuff together, I'm having a hard time to even know where to begin, to tell you the truth. So I was glad you were going to be discussing it.
Let's make a couple of announcements. Your announcement was to the effect of those people in the class who want to work together in a study group need not meet physically, but if they will contact you, Teresa Glazer, on Canvas, you guys can work on all those study questions and, by the way, on these cases virtually.
Okay.
And the final exam, or else something in between now, but probably the final exam, will have a series of questions from the multiple choice selections.
Okay.
And it will have a case of some sort that will take quite a bit of financial analysis, number crunching, build a demand curve and consumer surplus, and discussion. Horrendous discussion in terms of, okay, now you've got this data, what are you going to do?
Okay.
So case one on H&H fishing lures is kind of where we'll start, and we'll do some of that tonight.
Okay.
And then the other part of that exam, which is going to make it a very long exam, is some questions on macroeconomics.
Okay.
So my announcement is that I will post some study questions for the economics videos that if you'll work on those, that will do the same thing as the multiple choice questions on the textbook.
Okay. So
All that said,
the final's going to be then the study questions?
textbook study questions, macroeconomics questions, and some sort of a case presentation or case analysis.
Okay.
So I can well imagine that'd be every bit of a 3-hour exam.
I would say so.
I'm still debating how much to lean in the direction of open book or simply giving you a set of references rather than an open textbook. But I know that for the cases and such, probably it's all cases and practice. Yeah.
Yep. If I can get the gist of it, then it's just plugging in the numbers.
That's a lot of it. That's especially getting started.
That's where
If you can't get started, then you have some difficulty.
Yeah.
Let's play with the case tonight, and if we don't get much in the way of economics done, we're still doing pretty good on that. This case, again, fictitious, it's about H&H fishing lures. I learned to use a little spinnerbait as a young boy for fishing called an H&H spinnerbait made by a company out in Louisiana. So I'm picking on them. That is still my favorite fishing lure. This case gives us some data on monthly sales, and we see some seasonality, and we talked about that last class. I'd rather than wading into that right now, back up a couple of steps, and let's talk about, with respect to just about any kind of a business or company you're going to do, and particularly when you're producing consumer items, you've got two fundamental routes in front of you. You can either be, I'm like everybody else, but I got the best price, or I ain't like everybody else, and so I ain't got the lowest price, but I have the best value. In other words, the benefits compared to the costs. If you read some of Michael Porter, it's a starting point. His stuff's about 30 years old now. But, in Management 3025, everybody did a SWOT analysis. We could do that with a company like H&H. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? What are your threats? But once you've listed those, then you've got to put them together. What are my strengths combined with my opportunities, and therefore, what does that tell me I ought to be looking at? And you might come up with 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 different routes to pursue. Not necessarily mutually exclusive. In fact, many of them will complement themselves. One problem with strategy is people tend to look at it and think you sit down one day, you figure it all out, and then you go do it. It is constantly evolving, constantly being challenged. And I'm sure you've seen in the embroidery business you're working with now. My example was a friend who started off with a yarn shop, developed it into a fabric shop, then developed it into a teaching you how to sew shop, and now it's called Alterations. It's got a different name, but it's an alteration shop, and it's got branches all over Gainesville now. You don't know what you're going to wind up with when you start. If you keep your mind open that way, at the very least, you're looking up and down in the sense of I'm looking to my suppliers, who I buy my raw materials from, and seeing what I can get with them, what our relationship is like, who has the power in that relationship. Too often, because they're larger than we are, we're buying only a small part of their whole offering. We don't have a lot of bargaining power in that sense, but we work the relationship. We're always timely with our payments. We're really nice to the salespeople or the reps whenever they come by. We maybe offer them some, not only praise when we see it, but also some suggestions on we're finding this and we're seeing it.
That's how we got our Landau, the uniform business.
Okay, perfect.
Because we wanted to go through somebody else, but they would not work with us. So we called up Landau, and they literally, the sales guy pulled over and said, let me call you back, and they worked out a deal.
Sure.
Because they were willing to
think about what the supplier is looking for. He's looking for somebody who knows what they need, who's regular in forecasting, doesn't create a lot of hassles, pays the bills on time. You show them that, and you show them you've got a fairly non-hassle revenue source for them, you can be okay. Then you got to look down the chain. You got to talk about who are my distributors, and then ultimately who are my customers. Because if you're going through distributors, there's an awful lot to be done there. Fishing lures. You know, they've talked about they're going to open a new Bass Pro Shop here in Gainesville sometime in 2016. Of course, they've said that in many other locations and haven't even broken ground. But imagine you're trying to sell a fishing lure. You ever been into a Bass Pro Shop?
No, because I'm not into it, but I've seen the buildings. They're amazing. Like, I've heard of them.
For a fisherman, it is, I have died and gone to heaven.
Right.
Because look at all these fishing lures and rods and reels and all these extra things I never thought about I wanted, and oh my goodness, I got to have it. How do you get your fishing lure put in a Bass Pro Shop? Right. That is the same problem food developers have in getting their stuff put into Publix. That shelf space is premium. It's very costly, front-end costs, etc. And all you got to do is finally get your stuff offered, and then they say, hey, we need a rush order real quick, and you fail to fill it. We're using our shelf space for somebody else. That's the most important thing we got. So you've got your issues with your distributors, and then ultimately the issues with the customers. But then you look sideways, too. You look sideways. Who are my competitors? What is it that's in competition with me? You know, one person said one time, basically every good is in competition with every other good because customers have finite amounts of money. Okay, true to an extent. But what are the close competition? Right. And I can tell you that if you get into fishing lures, these lures, the H&H, they're really for bass, for people who like to fish for bass, and there's several other species people are crazy about. So you're not in competition too much with the lures that are used for catfish or for brim or for walleye. So you start looking at who makes these other lures. Hopefully you spend a little bit of time learning about them. If I were selling these kind of lures, one of the things I'd be doing is going down to every distributor I could on a regular basis. What do displays look like? I'd be buying my competitors' lures, taking them home and taking them apart, seeing how they're made, what's good, what's bad, how are they balanced, what does the copy say on their little box or pamphlet or whatever they've got. It is sometimes a disappointment when you buy a nice cheap lure off of eBay and you get it back and all the directions are in Chinese.
That would be tough.
So there's some opportunities there like that. But we're looking at competition on one side. Who are they? What are they doing? What are they getting ready to do? How are they advertising? Who are they advertising to? Who are they distributing through? Do they have a sales force that goes out, or do they do all their stuff to distributors by mail or phone or email? They got a website. And, you know, if you've got 10 or 12 distributors, you've got several months' work just getting to understand what they're doing. On the other side, you got complements. Who else is selling stuff that is complementary to yours? That when people buy that product, they are probably also buying yours or very much in the market. And you've got to understand them just as well. That's where you can create some strategic alliances. You can package a couple of products together, run a sale together with another company that sells a complementary product. And so this whole competitive environment that you're planning this strategy in, you can't even begin to start till you've done enough to know what the playing field looks like, sideways and up and down. Michael Porter and his generic strategies and his 5 forces model, they're discussed in the book, and they're okay to start with and to try to put it in some sort of framework. But I think if you think just that way, up and down and sideways, you've got a good start. Having said that, we basically, in these cases, we make the assumption you've done all that kind of stuff. You know pretty well who's my competitors, who's my supporting complementary goods, what's going up and down the supply chain, and we give you data. Now, the thing I wanted to add tonight that we haven't done, let's talk about kind of what we have done. One is I give you 2 data points, price and quantity. Price 1, price 2, quantity at that price, quantity at that price. And from that, you had to construct a straight line demand function. And that's what we did at some length on that first problem. Then I said, after you know the straight line demand function, I think the thing you got to be able to do is critique it. Why is this useful, and yet why is it also potentially very misleading? And we'll take a little moment to draw some here. I hope this is showing. If I have this data point and this data point, and I connect them and I say, well, I think that's my demand curve. Well, that's only 2 data points. It may be that besides these 2 experiences, if I were to look enough through history, or maybe with working with some people selling complementary goods or substitute goods, they may show data points out here or over here. And then you say, well, does my demand curve run like this, or does it run more up and down, more inelastic, or is it in fact more elastic? I mean, we get into, there's a tremendous amount of variability in here. So I don't want people thinking that just because I found historically 2 prices and sales at those different prices, oh, I know what my demand curve looks like. So I would expect folks to be able to comment to that effect on an exam. This is a rough approximation at best. Once we've done that, the next thing we did was to talk about the consumer surplus that's implied from our fairly simplistic example or theory. So we had to be able to construct this consumer surplus at any given price. If I know the demand curve at a given price, I measure the quantity, and I know that this area under the demand curve represents money that people aren't spending, that probably they would at least spend some of it, and so I want to know how much is it, and then I want to talk different strategies, pricing strategies, sales strategies for going after it. And I don't think we're going to do too much of that tonight, as much as, let me just mention, we're going to talk about price discrimination, which is charging different customers different prices for what is essentially the same product. Not illegal, as long as you're kind of open about it. I mean, if I go to the movies and as an old geezer I pay a discounted rate, that's price discrimination, but it's fairly common knowledge, and it's legal.
Is that what we do when I was telling you the difference in the price if you buy it from us versus come in? That's right. But they know that.
Yeah,
you bring it in. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a cost difference for you,
yes.
so absolutely justified in charging different prices. But, well, for example, you buy the lunch special at a restaurant for this price, the same thing at supper is a larger price, right. And they'll tell you, well, it's bigger helpings. Yeah. Okay, maybe so. But price discrimination comes in 3 types: first degree, second, and third. And again, I don't want to really drag through those tonight. I'd like to get some more voices here so we can go back and forth on some examples. But I can, at the extreme, if I could take every customer that comes in my store, haggle with him and get him to pay his maximum price, that would be the perfect, complete price discrimination. Probably a good idea if you're going to sell airplanes.
Right.
You know? You're going to sell high dollar stuff, but not going to work in basic retail sales. So other ways to do it. Also in there, however, we're going to talk about block pricing, where if you customarily buy 2,000 units at $6 a piece, Maybe I can find a way to get, and I know there's consumer surplus in there, maybe I can say, I'll sell you 2,000 of them for $5 a piece, plus a membership fee in my buying club or something like that.
That's on one of your videos we talked
Yeah, that, what I really described there is called two-part pricing, you know, a membership fee plus a cost per unit. If I could take that whole price discriminate, the price consumer surplus, and say, look, I know you paid this much, I know you would have paid this much, I'd lump them all together and say, I'll give you all 2,000 of them for this much money, one price. If I'm within the limits of your consumer surplus, in theory, you'll do that. So maybe I go in some sense in that direction.
We talk about like Sam's Club and stuff. That's the
Sam's Club and such has membership stuff.
Right.
Plus, they make you buy in such quantity.
Correct. It's all the bulk.
Yeah, right. Bring your trailer.
Yeah.
But to me, it's fascinating to go to Sam's Club, and it used to be right next door at Walmart.
Yeah.
And just look at the difference in the way they market.
Yeah.
And it's even a different buying
And
experience.
they did one even better in Miami when they built a Sam's Club. They had a daycare. I mean, a huge playground daycare.
Wow.
And you could do a beeper, and you could drop your child off and shop. And now you had to be a member, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a babysitter who used to take my son, and I literally, in order for her to keep him, I became a member so that she could take my son in when she had him, because she had him during the day a lot. I shopped a lot, but I don't, to me, to buy that bulk, unless it's paper products, it's just my son and I. It'll go to waste. But paper products and stuff I see. But literally, that was a benefit to me, that so she could have a spot so she could do her shopping and still watch them. So, yeah, that was down in Homestead when they built that one down there. It's huge.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
That would be a fascinating case approach, too, is to say, you've got this business. What are the pros and cons? Give me a go or no go on free daycare as part of this membership fee.
Correct.
Is it
And gyms do that. Gainesville Fitness Center, that's huge for that.
Absolutely.
It's huge. Yeah.
And I think it'd be fascinating to do a study and see how many people take advantage of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And what it costs Gainesville Health and Fitness.
To hire people.
To hire
and
people,
the
to
liability.
insure that,
Yeah.
all
Yep.
that, compared to what else is going on.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thinking that I'll bet you when Joseph really opened up Gainesville Health and Fitness back in the, 70s,
Yeah.
he never thought about a daycare center.
No.
It just evolves.
Yeah.
You know?
My brother knows him. I want to talk with him. His customer service, I'm dying to know who does their customer service training. I'm very impressed with their customer service. And it takes a lot for me to be impressed. I've been in it a long time, but it takes a lot because, I mean, I know they're made to know names, but the fact that most of the time they're scanning your card and your name pops up, so they do it. But when I'm walking in the door and they're making sure they remember before they've scanned my card.
That's pretty good.
And if I'm at the other one, and it caught me off guard the first time I go, did they? Because it's early in the morning. But there's a couple other things that they've done, and I'd love to talk to him about that. Like, that I'm very impressed with.
I'd love to hear what you learned.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, have they had the same people for a long period of time? Is this a new group of people?
Yeah, I'm curious.
And I also wonder, how much is their turnover in employees?
Yeah, that would take
a lot of training.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention tonight gets back into the demand curve and the concept of elasticity. So we're going to do just a couple of simulations or sample calculations. Elasticity is really the ultimate question. If I raise my price, how many customers will I lose? If the answer is I raise my price and I don't lose many customers, the answer is raise your price. Mathematically, we measure that in economics. The concept is hugely important. And while I'm speaking of that, who would know most about whether a customer would tolerate price increases, or at least have the best guess?
I would think the people that are on the floor.
The salesperson on the floor, or if you're selling commercially or industrial, your sales force that's out there. And the other one, and this is a pet peeve of mine, your customer support people on the telephone. The people who are dealing with customers who are having problems. That's the only reason they call in.
Right.
Yeah. All you get to listen to is customers with issues all day long. And too often, businesses look at that function and say, that's just a cost of doing business. We're just going to put people in there, solve the problems as best we can. Salesforce, get out and sell some more. And yet they probably know more about the weaknesses in your equipment, the strengths in your equipment.
And really turn the customers around.
They are the most pivotal point, particularly with an unsatisfied customer that can turn that sale. Instead, they're treated like...
Right. Do you know Walt Disney Company and their call center? It was in Tampa. I was in Brandon. They're in Tampa. Their call center is treated exactly like the park. They are in full we call them costume uniform. They're dressed, even though nobody ever sees them, they are in full dress. They have the full training. And I remember talking to them and was very impressed because that is the bulk of Walt Disney's. They know that you need to make them happy when you call. Or you might, I mean, there still might come, but that if they're unhappy, those are the ones they're going to call.
And you've done it more than I have. But my experience is it's the unhappy customer that you can turn around and make your best customer.
Absolutely.
Usually without a whole lot of hassle. We did the lifetime value of a customer in here.
Yes.
The whole idea. How much money is that person going to spend? Okay. Elasticities, very briefly, and this will sound much like Dr. Cersei's class, I'm sure. If we have 2 points identified from our sales data, when our price was $20, our sales was 1,000 units a day. When we were selling at $16, we found ourselves selling, 2,000 a day. So we have 2 points that we imagine to be on our demand curve. And we want to measure, this is my symbol, an E sub D, the price elasticity of demand between those 2 points. Not horribly difficult math. Mathematically, it's a percentage change in how much they buy divided by any percentage change in price that we impose. And percentage change here is the key to the calculation. The percentage change in quantity is the change in quantity divided by the average quantity. So let's do that right down here. The change in quantity was 1,000. The average quantity between the two, we add them together and divide by 2. 1,000 plus 2,000 is 3,000. 3,000 divided by 2 is 1,500. That's our percentage change in quantity. It's a real simple calculation if you get used to doing it. Same thing. Percentage change in price is the change in price divided by the average price. So up here, the change in price is 4. The average price, 20 plus 16 is 36, divided by 2 is 18. So here we would say the price elasticity of demand is 1,000 divided by 1,500. All of that divided by 4 over 18. You do it a few times, it gets easier.
Okay.
I promise.
It.
Now, I'm from the old school, and I tend to do this in fractions. This is 10 over 15 divided by 4 over 18. That means 10 over 15 multiplied by 18 over 4.
Okay.
That's from way back when.
Yeah.
If you've got a calculator, you can take 1,000 divided by 1,500, and that will give you 0.67. And then 4 divided by 18 is about 0.22. And you can do that division. In my case, this reduces to 2/3. So this is 36 divided by 12, which is 3. Which is about right. 0.22 and 0.66 would be 3.
Right.
I'm amazed when it all works out.
Yeah.
What this says, this number, E sub D here, is 3.0. And there are 2 possibilities for this elasticity figure. It will generally either be less than 1 or it will be greater than 1, 1.0. Now there's some negative figures in here. I'm ignoring the negative sign. When we calculate this number and it's greater than 1, as it is here, we say that's an elastic demand. And that means every time I raise my price, customers are pretty sensitive, and I make less revenue from my sales. That's not necessarily a bad thing. because if I'm not selling as many, my cost of production are down too. So this is where I want to be, somewhere in this elastic range. I want to be trying to figure out how to maximize my profits there. But occasionally we get an elasticity figure that's less than 1. And that's when the warning siren should go off. That is an inelastic demand. When the demand is inelastic, it means when you raise your price, you'll actually make more money. And hopefully it produces less stuff. So this would be a happy world to be in. So if you calculate it and it's less than 1, 0.62 or whatever like that, you go 2 steps. Hurrah! And now raise your price. Don't leave your price there, because if you raise it, you'll make more money for doing less work or selling less stuff. So when it's inelastic, it means you are underpricing your product. And that's one of the things I'll ask on the case questions. Calculate that elasticity for those 2 data points and tell me if they are underpricing their product. That was the big explanation I wanted to make sure I covered tonight. So that if you can get historical sales data on any organization, and you think the years are comparable, the markets are the same people, the product was the same product, the economy was in the same state, then you can start saying, you can do some real quick runs like this and go, you guys are pricing your product so low, you're just giving away money.
So historical data, like, what's the rent, like the last 2 years? Does it depend on how long? Okay.
You don't want to go back real far because markets change a lot.
Okay.
Ideally, instead of historical data in one market, you want historical data in 2 markets that are comparable. You know, they have the same kind of customers, same kind of income. You know, how do they behave?
Because that's what we're trying to do at Logos, try to get a better way of recording that. I mean, we have an Excel program. He puts in how much we sell, but we don't know who that was or what the thing was or the event. And
that's kind of what we were talking about last time.
Right.
Getting all that intel on that customer can really make the difference.
Right. And I noticed a lot of them doing that I've not seen before. Like when they come in, they ask how they heard about us. Mm-hmm. We find out by them. We've talked to them, and then some it's just they walked in, somebody else told them. So we're trying to find that out. But I need to be able to keep a better record of that. Because like we had a big day the other day, and unless I remember who walked in the door, and now I'm going to see it later. Yeah,
you can't recover.
Yeah, and it literally was a woman who was at Home Depot came in, and she ended up spending $1,000 with us for a company to do logos on stuff. And if we keep her happy, they'll be back. But she had said she'd come in there one time before when we first opened, but I guess we never thought. Again, we don't have an accurate way of keeping track of it. So that's what my project's to do, is I'm trying to figure out a better way to keep. Because this was all done for me in retail. Because most retail companies,
they're a little more
they've got an established thing. I need to do this for this business.
This is artificial, what I'm going to propose, but it's a way you're trying to organize it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, can you identify your customers either type A, B, C, or D, however many categories you want.
Right.
A, we'll give them a name, heavy hitter.
Right. Yeah.
They are not price sensitive.
That's my brother talked about. Yeah.
B, he's got a lot of money, but he's a little careful.
Yeah.
C wants the best deal, the best value.
Right.
And D is just El Cheapo.
Okay. Or for us, that would be single item ones, like they just want to accept. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Okay.
And if you can start identifying those, at least in your customer records, when you pull this part of the database out, you may communicate with them on a whole lot different level than you do with the others. And those are the ones where, when you know this customer's coming in, you got your best salesperson or higher up out there to meet them.
Those are the ones for me that want to speak to the owner, which we're having a hard time, because I'm running the office and they come in and I get it. They want to talk to the owner, but he's in the back really working. Really, all they want to do is put in an order, and I can help them. But there's a few that he needs to come out and talk to.
There are some of them you guys.
And then some, though, it's funny. I always want to say in their business. I bet if we walked into theirs and we need to speak to him, he's not gonna come out.
Nope.
I mean, because but it's a different service business. We're in a service, and so he'll come out, and that's why I tell him, I was like, Art, I need to know who I need to get you and who I need to say, well, if you need an order, I'll be glad to help you, whatever. And so I'm starting to learn a few of them, but there's a few that walk in and I need to just get Art because they want to see the owner. And
some of them, that's the only route.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
bingo.
yeah.
Don't even fight it.
Right.
Depending on the situation, you
Yeah.
may have a little conference room set aside so
Right.
that if you can make these people make an appointment or when you see them come in, it's not business over the desktop. It's
Right.
come on in, let me get you a cup
Yeah.
of coffee. And
Right.
in my taxidermy business, these folks, when they came in,
Yeah.
drop everything, talk to them, give them all the time they
Right.
want, give them all the books,
Right.
whatever you needed to do.
Yeah.
I have driven from Stark, Florida down to St. Petersburg to deliver work
Yep.
for people that
Yep.
were worth it because we
Yeah.
knew they were
Right.
somewhere
Yeah,
in
that
the
makes
span.
sense.
So some system of identifying.
Yeah.
And what I'm really talking about here is these are the people with the highly inelastic demand all the way down to the people with the highly elastic. And so allied with that, the term the heavy half, or Pareto's view on activity. That's where 20% of your customers account for 80% of your sales.
Yeah.
Coffee drinkers, they used to use that as a rule of thumb. 20% of the people that buy coffee drink 80% of the coffee.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so if you're not identifying those folks, that's just more and more
Right.
opportunity going out the window.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Trying to figure out how to market that part of it.
And part of all of this comes back to as many people in your organization as possible are informed that this is what we're looking at, and we go overboard for these folks.
Right.
And sometimes for these folks, we need to fire them. We don't even need
Yeah.
a business.
Yeah.
So, okay. That was heart and soul of what I want to cover tonight, and in fact, 90% of it anyway. Maybe the little calculation on the elasticity is a
Yeah,
little twist. But
that's where I get panicky.
no, okay.
I know.
We'll do it a
We
few
practice.
times, and
Okay.
that'll make it easy.
Yeah,
Now,
it's just practice.
very quickly on the macroeconomics.
Okay.
I don't recall where we stopped last time, but I can tell you that there are two topics coming up, one of which I haven't put the materials up for, the other of which I have lectures on, and I'll make sure I post them to Canvas. It's on this idea of austerity and stimulus.
Yeah, you've got them posted.
Okay,
I
those are
just
on it?
watched, because there's some that's just you talking to the camera and then yours in a class, so you
Good,
have talked
good.
about.
So
Yeah, it's
those
on
are there.
I just watched those yesterday.
Good,
So,
because
yeah,
that argument is going to be on the exam.
okay.
Okay, what does each one say, and what are the goods and bads about each one?
And I had a question. Because you were talking about the different things, and I was trying to relate it to where I knew, like, I think it was either the stimulus. It was almost like you were trying to debate it, and I was thinking it was kind of like making a minimum payment on your credit card. You'll never get it paid off. I guess you were talking about the loans that we're taking. Do we continue to borrow to drop to stimulate
The
right?
economy.
But even though we're getting more in debt, it's going to in the long run, or do we do the other back and forth? And the only way I could relate it to was, you'll never get the bigger one. We're such in debt unless we do something dramatically. It's almost like making a minimum payment on your credit card.
There's
Because
a
you
parallel
said-
there.
right.
Here, let me reverse that a moment. It's what I call the paradox of macroeconomics.
Right.
If you have a family who's going broke, you've got to either go out and make more money or spend less money.
Right.
That's all there is to it.
Right.
But if you treat the entire economy that way, that when they're going broke because they're going into debt,
Right.
you decide to cut their spending and raise taxes to help pay off debt, all you do is make the economy get worse.
Right. Right.
That's the fallacy of austerity
Right.
when you try to do it in a recession or a depression. as we've been
Right.
through.
Right.
Although in Greece, for example, they almost had no other choice. Their
Right.
government was so corrupt. Their
Right.
spending was so out of control.
Right.
But that's not the case in the United
Right.
States.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
That's in there. So I
Good.
read that. So if that's going to be on the stimulus versus
Stimulus austerity. The other one, just as a pre-warning, is got to do with why did we bail out the banks in this crisis instead of bailing out the borrowers? Because the banks were very crooked.
Right.
They were making loans to people that didn't know any better, and there were a lot of greedy people taking advantage of it.
Right. But on the bigger picture.
Yeah, when you don't take care of those borrowers and you let them go belly up, how do
we
you
did
ever
that
get recovered?
in our law class. She had us do that Goldman Sachs. No, that was the what was the video?
Goldman Sachs book.
The bubble. Yeah, but then there was a video that we watched that talked about the bubble, and so she didn't care which side you picked, but the documentary had the borrowers, some of the people who knew that they weren't making that kind of money, but really wanted the house, the ones who were trying, so you picked it. You just had to, she's a lawyer, so you had to just pick a side and defend it. She didn't care which side you were on, but it was a good document. I don't know if she did it in the next class, but it was good to see. I didn't know a lot about that bubble.
Your experience with people in retail, probably similar to mine. There are a lot of people out there that if you tell them it's okay, you can borrow this, they think they can do it. They think it's okay.
Yeah. If you open up a credit card, that's a perfect example. These stores open up a credit card. They'll open up a credit card for anyone. Now they're hitting students.
Oh yeah.
So
always.
we'll give you a limit. We don't care because we're gonna get the 22% interest.
That's right. And we'll come after you.
But in retail, it's hard for us because I always say you don't sell from your own pocket, and it's kind of like the credit cards. You're an adult. Like my job is to open them. Whether or not I agree that we should get into debt, like I have a lot of employees that are like, but I don't think they should open up cards or just get in debt. I agree, but your job's to open them, and they are an adult. We're not doing it to 18. If they open up a card, that's your choice. Now, the ones who are catering to the younger group or before that's a whole other area. But
there's some ethical questions there.
But the job is, I didn't twist their arm to open it. I suggested it. They said yes. End of story. But it is hard on the retail because I hate opening them. Hate them. But it's my job when I worked in retail, so that's what I had to do. But I get it because I've been in that debt side of it.
And for the young person who's 1 in 1,000 that manages that credit well,
correct.
They set a great credit record for themselves.
Correct, which luckily I did, but not always does that happen. So, okay.
Okay, all set?
Yeah, I'm good.
Good night.